Hello everyone, I'm Mara Benitez, Library Assistant at the Seguin Public Library, and this is the second video of our beginner sewing series. In this video, we're going to cover 3 basic types of stitches that can be used in most hand sewing projects. Before we get started, let's discuss threading your needle. You'll want to make sure the end of your thread is clean cut to make it easy to push through the eye of the needle. If it starts to split, just snip it off again. If you find that the eye on your needle is too small and makes it difficult to thread by hand, I recommend using a threader. You push the threader through the eye of the needle, then put your sewing thread into the threader and pull the threader out, dragging the sewing thread along with it. Now before we knot the end of our thread, we have 2 options. We can either take both ends and tie them both into the knot, or leave one end free. Doubling the thread gives it twice the strength and durability in our sewing, however it also uses twice as much thread. Depending on how strong you need your project to be, you might want to consider this. I find that sewing with a single thread instead of a double thread is less likely to tangle as you pull it through. However, this can be remedied by watching your thread carefully as you pull it through. My favorite method for knotting the thread is to take your needle in your right hand and the tail in your left, bring them together to make a circle, and pinch the tail with the needle in your right hand. Use your left hand to wind the thread around the needle. The more times you wind, the bigger your knot will be. A smaller knot is easier to hide, but if the weave of your fabric is loose, it might slide through. So just gauge the best size for your project. I find about 6 to 10 winds for regular all-purpose thread is enough. Then pull the needle through, sliding those winds all the way down to the end, and you have a knot. Our first stitch is the most basic stitch, the running stitch. This stitch is made in a continuous over and under motion across the fabric. You can adjust the length of the stitches on either side of the fabric if you like, or make them consistent on both sides. This is a great stitch to use if you just want an easy way to hold 2 pieces of fabric together. Sometimes seamstresses will use this stitch to test out placement of their seams before putting in a more durable permanent stitch. Something to keep in mind that could work for or against you is that since this stitch moves in one continuous direction, you can slide the fabric along your thread to bunch it together. This is useful if you're trying to make a ruffled or pleated edge. You can then go over the pleats with another stitch to secure them in place. Our second stitch is the back stitch. It is more secure than the running stitch and doesn't slide, since you keep jumping back in your sewing, hence the name. To begin, bring your thread through the fabric as usual. Now you're going to jump back behind where you came out for 1 stitch length. Then bring the needle up ahead 1 stitch length. You should now have 1 stitch and a gap after it before the thread. Now put your needle down in front of that last stitch you made and come back up a stitch length ahead. And you just continue to repeat this process across the seam. As you continue to work with this stitch, keep the back side of the fabric in mind, as it is easy for the stitches to fall out of line and appear sloppy. Our last stitch is the whip stitch, which can make for a very neat, fairly invisible hem. You'll want to keep the stitch small if you want it to be secure, but a large, well-spaced whip stitch is great for a temporary hem. While the other 2 stitches were worked on top of both pieces of fabric, or top stitched, the whip stitch is worked between the 2 pieces or folds of fabric. For an invisible whip stitch, you'll pick up just a single thread on your needle from just under the inside edge of the hem, then push through the hem and pull your thread through. Repeat this across the hem, picking up a thread and pushing through the hem. With a single thread, this stays fairly invisible on the outside of the project, such as a pant line or skirt edge. However, you could also pick up more of the fabric for a more secure hem. Using a coordinating thread, this stitch is practically invisible. So now you have 3 basic hand sewing stitches that can be used in just about any project. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for our 3rd video in this series, where we'll show you how to take this knowledge and create an origami bento bag.